Okay, girls. So I'm looking at your healthcare project, and so I have a few comments to make, and so I'm going to actually look at these boards. Increase the size of it. Sorry. Okay, so I like the idea of trying to replicate the circles, but the circles still need to be kind of solidified or attached to something. The other thing, I'm not sure if you were in the class yesterday where I had mentioned to a few of the girls that when you start to put placeholders, so for example, you're putting this placeholder for your inspiration and you're doing a placeholder for your location details and your project description, it's good if you can actually fill it in with mock text or mock images, because that will start to help you get a feeling for how that's actually visually going to look. So for example, your inspiration pieces, I don't know if they're going to be pictures of people relaxing, healing environments, what that is, but it'll help to set the tone of the board if you go ahead and put that in there. Typically, the concept goes on the first board, which I think that's the way you intend this to do, but it also is sometimes good to have the floor plan on the first board. I'm going to be a little bit scattered. Also, I'm not crazy about the font of the Reverie or the logo. Really good logos kind of are intertwined, and I like the sort of waves that's happening, and it goes along with the interior, but I don't feel the connection between the logo and the waves. So I think somebody could try to work on establishing a little bit better logo. So I started playing around with how would you take that logo and incorporate it more into the board so that it's not so spotty, so that there's a better connection with the board. I like the circle sort of transparent dots that are happening through there, but I think that you need to make it have a little bit more of a connection and less so many dots. The other piece is that I think that the samples and the furniture aren't connected to anything. They're just floating out there in space. And so you could try the idea of actually giving it a grid behind it. So like this grid I've given down here, I might push those samples up a little bit so it feels a little bit solidified on the board. I also looked at decreasing the size of your perspective a little bit. In this picture, I feel like there's no breathing room between these, and I think that this is one big square, but it feels like it's a frame around the rendering, and if it's a frame, then the line is too thick. If it's a box, then the renderings need to be a little bit smaller. When I was playing here, since they're two different spaces, I kind of feel like the two different renderings need to be in different locations. I even played with here of doing the location and then trying to do the furniture and finishes more closely related to those. I had even looked at maybe even adding in a component of the floor plan. I think your floor plan needs to be toned down on the rendering. It's awfully hot. Those hot spots are awfully white. So I think you can do a better job at like toning down, not making the value so dark in the different spaces that you are designating, and maybe even put a light taupey color like that in where the public spaces are, the circulation paths are. So I think you really need to work on the logo. Somebody could do that. Work on really trying to establish, I think, you know, even I kind of like then redid the circle here, maybe put your logo down here on this end. These two boards to me don't seem necessarily connected yet. Just the dots behind it doesn't connect the boards. Also, I feel like you need a floor pattern in this treatment area. Let me go back and look at them. So they're looking out the window at that treatment area. Okay, I like that idea. But there might be a wave or some other pattern of interest in that corridor where people are walking behind them. I wonder if Dr. D felt like people would feel weird being in that chair with people walking behind them. Is there a cubicle curtain that closes part of the way? That's not articulated in that. So I like the idea of the circles, but I think they need to be, you know, contained or actually contained with each individual rendering. I'm not crazy about the floor plans here. It could even be that maybe you take a, if this is going to be your first board, maybe you just take a mini floor plan. But the way you have it rendered, it's too harsh. But maybe you just actually put a mini floor plan there and key it so that people know where you're putting it together. I think you're making progress, but I think you've got a lot more to think about. Just think about the visual cues that you're giving people. Not that it be read, but just to be able to say, hey, here's this there, and there's this there. And I'm not saying that this is right, but I'm just saying that maybe you can provide a tiny map and give them a connection to where you're showing where that is on this board. But I think I think you've made some progress, but I think we have to really kind of maybe be willing to look at a variety of different board layouts and see how we can solidify this. And then I would probably make my font on the text maybe a brown, not necessarily a black. And I would probably, on your board where you have the reception area and the treatment area, I would probably figure out a way to include that label inside the rendering maybe and make it a little bit bigger. So that way you get a little bit more room breathing. All right, I hope this helps. Go Philadelphia. I'm cheering for them too. And I will actually, I'm going to end up seeing you all on, seeing you on Thursday of next week. We will not meet for class on Tuesday.